The studio went completely silent. Dr. Phil McGraw, a man who had spent 40 years navigating the most complicated human stories imaginable, sat frozen in his chair. His hand, which had been reaching for the white envelope on the table between them, stopped midair. Across from him, a 14-year-old boy named Marcus sat with his shoulders squared, tears streaming down his face, but his voice steady as he spoke words that would change everyone in that room. "I forgive him," Marcus said quietly, "not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace." The cameras continued rolling, but something had shifted. This wasn't just another episode. This was the moment a child walked into that studio carrying the weight of a tragedy no young person should ever bear, and walked out having taught every adult in the room what true courage actually looks like. But how did a 14-year-old end up holding a piece of paper that would make Dr. Phil stop the show, break protocol, and do something he'd never done in 4 decades of television? 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had written a letter, not to Dr. Phil, not to the producers, but to the man who had killed his mother in a drunk driving accident 2 years prior. The letter had sat in his drawer for months, unopened, unsent, burning a hole through his everyday life. His grandmother had found it, read it through tears, and knew immediately that her grandson was drowning in something too big for their small family to handle alone. She called the Dr. Phil show not because she wanted television exposure, not because she needed an audience, but because she had watched Dr. Phil help other families navigate impossible grief, and she was terrified she was losing her grandson to the same darkness that had already taken her daughter. The producers read Marcus's letter. Then they read it again. Then they showed it to Dr. Phil, who cleared his schedule and said 2 words: "Book him." When Marcus walked onto that stage, he looked like any other teenager, nervous, fidgeting with his hoodie strings, avoiding eye contact with the audience. But Dr. Phil saw something else. He saw the same look he'd seen in combat veterans, in abuse survivors, in people who had stared into the deepest darkness and somehow kept breathing. "Marcus," Dr. Phil began, his voice gentler than usual, "your grandmother tells me you've been carrying something heavy, something you wrote but never sent. Is that right?" Marcus nodded, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. "Can you tell me what made you write it?" The boy's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I was tired of being angry all the time." The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't what they expected. They came for confrontation, for drama, for the Dr. Phil they knew from clips and memes, but what they were about to witness was something entirely different. Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Marcus, I want you to know something before we go any further. You don't know anyone in this room, including me, a single piece of your story. You don't have to read that letter. You don't have to explain your pain. You can stand up and walk out of here right now, and I will personally make sure you get home safely. Do you understand?" Marcus looked up for the first time, meeting Dr. Phil's eyes. "I understand, but I want to. I want people to know that you can survive the worst thing and still choose something other than hate." Dr. Phil nodded slowly. "Okay, then let's do this together." What happened next wasn't scripted. Dr. Phil reached for the envelope Marcus's grandmother had brought, the one containing the letter Marcus had written in his darkest moment. But before he opened it, he did something no one expected. "Stop the tape," Dr. Phil said, holding up his hand to the cameras. The entire production crew froze. In 40 years, Dr. Phil had never stopped a taping mid-show. The audience murmured, confused, wondering if something had gone wrong. Dr. Phil stood up from his chair and walked directly to Marcus, kneeling beside him so they were at eye level. The microphones barely picked up what he said next, but the cameras caught it. "Marcus, once we read this letter, once it's out there, you can't take it back. Your pain will be public. Your forgiveness will be public. People will have opinions about whether you should feel what you feel. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Marcus nodded, but Dr. Phil didn't move. "I need to hear you say it, son." "I'm sure," Marcus said, his voice stronger now. "I'm tired of being angry all the time." The studio audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't what they expected. They came for confrontation, for drama, for the Dr. Phil they knew from clips and memes. But what they were about to witness was something entirely different. Dr. Phil leaned forward. Tapes up.
He wrote about the nightmares, about the empty chair at the dinner table, about his grandmother trying to be both grandmother and mother, and how hard she worked to keep him from drowning in grief. He wrote about his mother's favorite song, about how he couldn't listen to it for a year without breaking down, and how last month he finally played it all the way through and smiled at the memories instead of collapsing into the loss. He wrote about forgiveness not being about forgetting, but about choosing who gets to define your future. And he chose himself. When Dr. Phil finished reading, he carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then he did something completely off script. He looked directly into the camera, addressing not the studio audience, but everyone watching at home. "If you're watching this," Dr. Phil said, his voice thick with emotion, "and you think forgiveness means weakness, I want you to understand something. This young man just taught every single one of us what real strength looks like. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from carrying their burden." He turned back to Marcus. "Did you ever send this letter?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I don't think he needs to see it. I wrote it for me, not for him." Dr. Phil sat back in his chair, and for a moment, he wasn't the television host, the psychologist, or the public figure. He was just a man moved beyond words by the courage of a child. "Marcus," Dr. Phil said slowly, "I want you to do something for me. I want you to stand up." Marcus looked confused, but stood. "Now, I want you to look at this audience. Really look at them." Marcus turned, his eyes scanning the rows of faces, all of them wet with tears, all of them looking back at him with something that transcended pity. It was respect. "Every single person in this room came here today expecting to see something," Dr. Phil said, "but what they got was the privilege of witnessing real healing. Your story, your courage, your choice to forgive. That doesn't just change your life, Marcus. It changes everyone who hears it." The audience began to stand, first one person, then another, then the entire studio was on its feet, applauding not with the performative energy of television audiences, but with the quiet, reverent appreciation of people who had just witnessed something genuinely sacred. Marcus stood there, 14 years old, too young to fully understand the weight of what he'd just done, but old enough to feel the shift in the room. Dr. Phil stood as well, walking over to Marcus and placing both hands on his shoulders. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said quietly, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. "And I'm honored to have met you." Then, Dr. Phil did something he'd never done in the history of his show. He pulled Marcus into a hug, holding him as the boy finally let himself break down completely, sobbing into Dr. Phil's shoulder, releasing years of pain in front of millions of people. The cameras kept rolling, but the crew was crying too. The producers in the control room were crying. Security guards standing at the exits were crying. This wasn't television anymore. This was humanity. When Marcus finally pulled back, Dr. Phil handed him a tissue and smiled. "You okay?" Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes. "Yeah, I think I actually am." Dr. Phil turned to the camera one more time. "We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to introduce you to some people who are going to help Marcus and his grandmother moving forward, because this isn't the end of the story. This is the beginning." During the commercial break, which the home audience never saw, Dr. Phil sat with Marcus and his grandmother off camera. He'd already arranged for grief counseling, for a scholarship fund, for resources that would help this family not just survive, but thrive. "Marcus," Dr. Phil said quietly, "I want you to keep that letter. Don't send it. Keep it as a reminder of the day you chose yourself. And if you ever feel like the darkness is coming back, I want you to read it again and remember how strong you are." Marcus nodded, clutching the envelope. "And if that doesn't work," Dr. Phil added, pulling out a business card, "you call this number anytime, day or night. Someone will always answer." Marcus took the card, looking at it with wide eyes. "Really?" Really, Dr. Phil said. You've got people in your corner now. Don't forget that. When the show came back from break, Dr. Phil introduced the team of counselors, the scholarship representatives, the community support network that had been assembled in the 3 weeks since Marcus's grandmother first called. The audience watched as this family, who had walked into the studio carrying an unbearable weight, walked out with an army of support behind them. But the moment that would be replayed millions of times, the moment that would be shared across social media and discussed in schools and therapy offices, was the moment Dr. Phil's voice cracked as he read that letter. Because in that moment, the man who had counseled presidents and celebrities, who had written best-selling books and revolutionized daytime television, was reminded of why he started doing this work in the first place. It wasn't about the ratings. It wasn't about the fame. It was about the Marcus Thompsons of the world, the kids who were trying to figure out how to keep breathing after their whole world collapsed. 6 months after the episode aired, Marcus's grandmother sent Dr. Phil a letter. Marcus was doing well in school. The nightmares had decreased. He joined a peer support group for young people dealing with grief and loss. He was even talking about becoming a counselor himself one day. And he still had the letter in its envelope in his drawer. But now, instead of being a weight he couldn't carry, it was a reminder of his own strength. Dr. Phil kept Marcus's story close as well. In interviews, he'd reference it as one of the most important episodes he'd ever done. Not because of the drama, not because of the tears, but because of what it represented. A child choosing healing over hatred, forgiveness over fury, hope over hopelessness. The white envelope became a symbol in Dr. Phil's work after that. Whenever he dealt with families struggling with forgiveness, he'd reference Marcus's letter. He talked about how forgiveness wasn't a gift to the person who hurt you, it was a gift to yourself. And every time he told that story, he'd remember the feeling of reading those words, of watching a 14-year-old teach the world what courage really means. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten, because sometimes the youngest voices carry the most powerful truths, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to heal.